Destiny has always been a villain of the week kind of game. Go all the way back to Destiny 1 Vanilla up to about Shadowkeep, and you can see a pattern of villains that are just swapped in and out per expansion. To be fair, Destiny 2 does a better job of foreshadowing villains via lore tabs and lore books than D1 did, but we didn't get a truly major villain teased in the lore until they started setting up Savathun, the Witch Queen. Within its almost 10-year lifespan, one villain stands out among the rest. One villain, with one of the most ambitious plans, is still mocked by most of the community to this very day. One villain had the most potential, but it was wasted by Bungie. That villain is none other than the Ghost Primus himself, Dominus Ghaul. Destiny 2 was set to make a big splash among the fans. We were coming off what was argued as peak Destiny with Rise of Iron and the Age of Triumph. So there, with bated breath, fans sat and watched Luke Smith take center stage and unveil the initial trailer and opening mission for Destiny 2. It was here we got our first glimpse at the Red Legion, and at the end of the trailer, an ominous figure flashed on screen. While Cade 6 would poke fun and call our new foe Gary, Luke Smith made sure to point out that his name was Ghaul, and we would do well to remember it. Once players got their hands on Homecoming, we were introduced to the Dominus. He overtook the tower, severed our connection to the light, kicked us off a ship, and left us for dead. However, as the campaign continued, we only saw snippets of Ghaul through cutscenes, until we finally confronted him in the final mission. Nowadays, people mock Ghaul for not doing anything in the campaign, as well as being a lackluster boss fight. I can't fault anyone for that because they're not entirely wrong. You see, much like Destiny 1, Destiny 2 suffered a massive narrative shift during development, once again causing the story to be scrapped and rewritten. At one time, it was easy to point the blame at Activision, but in the past few months it's become alarmingly clear that maybe it wasn't all entirely their fault. We know in D1 the original composer Martin O'Donnell was fired without cause and later went on to sue Bungie for wrongful termination. On top of that, we know the original narrative lead writer Joe Staten also left during development. Now, almost 10 years later, we see Bungie have massive layoffs, including current legendary composer Michael Salvatore. With reports coming out that Bungie execs are the ones causing the problems in the workplace, so while it's easy to point at Ghaul and toss him aside as another mediocre villain, I believe it's criminal to do so without acknowledging what could have been. Dominus Ghaul actually appears much earlier in the game than some people may remember. Back in Destiny 1 during the Outbound Signal mission, we discovered a Cabal transmission that was encrypted. Ghost was able to read some of the headers which informed us that it was a distress signal sent to the Cabal Emperor. We didn't know it at the time, but this message would reach Ghaul, as we can safely assume that around this time is when he staged the infamous Midnight Coup, which we learned about first in the Destiny 2 Collector's Edition. It would take roughly about 2 years before this would actually pay off, and when it did, we would meet, potentially, one of the greatest villains the game would have known. Let's take a look at the introduction to D2, Homecoming. In the blanket of a storm, the Red Legion sneaks into the last city and begins their siege. They lay waste to the tower. It takes all of the Vanguard and whatever Guardians available to hold the line above the Hall of Guardians. Then, we fight our way through the wrecked plaza until Amanda can pick us up and bring us to the flagship. Along the way, we learn that the Red Legion is one of the strongest armies in the Empire. Once on the ship, we fight our way through Red Legion until we damage some reactors. Afterwards, we make our way topside, where we witness the most terrifying thing a Guardian could face. We meet Dominus Ghaul and watch as he cages the Traveler and severs our connection to the light. He then delivers arguably the second greatest line in Destiny history. "You've simply forgotten the fear of death." I say second because Saladin has the greatest line in Rise of Iron, but that's for another time. This scene is arguably the best scene Bungie has ever produced, at least up to this point. The sheer helplessness that is portrayed here. We clutch our ghost, which is now seemingly dead. Ghaul kicks us off his ship. We then have to sneak out of the city and stay alive. We continue on, finding camp after camp of guardians who lost their light and were slaughtered by Cabal. We defend ourselves against the Cabal, barely making it out alive. Finally, we make it to the farm, broken and beaten. This is where Bungie missed an opportunity with Ghaul, thus wasting his potential. 1. We don't interact with him directly, and 2. We don't really feel his presence throughout the campaign. The original campaign has us getting our light back right away and then proceeding to rally the vanguard before leading an assault and retaking the city. Now imagine, if you will, a different scenario. Once we regain our light, we continue as normal, heading to the EDZ to set up comms and help Devrim. There, we start to chip away at the Red Legion. Word of a lone, light-wielding guardian makes its way up to the chain of command, back to the Council and Ghaul. Infuriated that we survived, he sends out elite battalions whose sole purpose is to eliminate us. Bungie could have even used the power scaling they do now to make sure that we can't one-shot anything, making us still feel like we're barely hanging on and surviving. We would face the first ones before we leave Earth. Then, on each subsequent planet, we cap off our main visit by fighting increasingly more difficult troops, each mission, or each wave, culminating with a boss. Think of the shades of Oryx from Destiny 1, but instead of Oryx, it's a Valis or a Brachus. By the end of it all, we would have dealt a devastating blow to Ghaul's operation and would have felt his presence every step of the way. This could even be portrayed in cutscenes, culminating with him killing the Council due to his failure to eliminate us, rather than it just kind of happening due to an argument. Then, after we dismantle the Almighty, we lead the assault to reclaim our home. Upon confronting Ghaul, we feel his anger. We see his rage. He throws his remaining troops at us, and after watching him wield the light against us, he transforms, causing the Traveler to awaken and deem him unworthy. And then it's over. Post-campaign would be spent rooting out any resistance as we then take Callus up on his invitation and venture to the Leviathan. This is what I meant when I said Ghaul was wasted potential. Instead of having a menacing force that chased us throughout the solar system, we spend more time cleaning out other enemy factions, the Hive, the Fallen, the Taken, the Vex. Imagine if Bungie actually focused solely on the Red Legion and made it feel like an actual war, pushing back footholds, breaking strongholds. Canonically, it's literally what we were training for with the Crucible and the Iron Banner, holding position, creating our own footholds. I know they switched focus during the development and wanted to bring in new players, but I think they could have done both. The power fantasy of being hunted and then beating improbable odds would have made Destiny 2 truly feel like a sequel. Instead, we are left with a sense of longing, a sense of wasted potential, and only thoughts of what could have been.